Hello, today is Monday, August 25th. Welcome to episode 493 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by senior fellow Bishop Garrison and fellow Jessica Jones. So today we're going to talk about the firing on Friday of the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Jeffrey Kruse of the Air Force. There was not a reason given by the administration for firing Kruse. News reports have linked his removal to the Defense Intelligence Agency's assessment of the American strikes on Iran back in June. That assessment supposedly, by the way, we have not seen the assessment. It is classified. News reports say the assessment says that the strike delayed the Iranian nuclear weapons program by several months. Contrast that with President Trump saying the program was obliterated. I have a hot take on this, by the way, that I'm going to save for later on the delta between several months and obliterated, the supposed delta. So news reports have linked it to that report. No one in the administration has said that. Another notable set of facts here is the removal of other senior people from senior positions in the defense infrastructure, in the defense community, in the intelligence community, and particularly in those places where they overlap. So in addition to the head of the DIA, we've seen the removal of the head of the Navy SEALs, the removal of the head of the National Security Agency. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs himself was removed several months ago. So there's been a pattern of this administration replacing key leaders in the military. That may be a factor in all of this, or it may not be. One of the issues here is the administration has not explained exactly what happened. Bishop, I want to go to you first here. What are your thoughts about the events on Friday and kind of this larger pattern?
Well, I think to your point, we need to hear more information from the administration specifically about why this happened. Particularly, this sets up what could be what would be, if it follows, a very bad precedent. Any type of senior leader, particularly the President of the United States, will want to have around himself or herself individuals that are subordinate leaders that are going to feel as though they are working in an environment of trust in which they can give the boss bad news. They can report out things that the boss may not want to hear, and they can be trusted to work together to figure out the proper solutions and to not immediately have some type of negative action taken against them, their careers, their subordinates. What we're seeing right now, at best, from an optics perspective, is anytime you have something that may be potentially bad news for leadership here, you run the risk of potentially being removed. It was widely reported from other sources across the globe that the strikes on the Iranian nuclear targets didn't do the damage that the United States and its allies had ultimately hoped. This is not a particular surprise. Now, it's a problem that if it was a classified leak, that in and of itself is an issue that definitely needs to be addressed about that information. But it shouldn't be a surprise or particularly controversial at this point that those targets were not necessarily damaged in the way that we thought or potentially hoped. So it really begs the question that ultimately what is going on here? When you talk about these service positions, these senior service leaders within the IC, within the military that handle a lot of our intelligence leadership, you really traditionally for years and years, for decades, arguably since the beginning of the IC, you've seen that these are positions that have been protected and been isolated from the political norms. You don't have a ton of political appointees over in the IC specifically because you didn't want politics playing a part in how we do our intelligence gathering and our spycraft. What we're seeing here, at best, from an optics perspective, is that politics can potentially win out when it comes to the intelligence community. And that is a position that is going to make us weaker as a national security apparatus and less safe as a country overall.
Jones, what's your take here? Is Kruse's firing the result of political retribution over the DIA report, or is it part of a comprehensive reform of leadership positions in our national security?
Please answer the unknowable right now.
Go.
Thanks, Les. It's Monday. Come on, that's too much. I mean, I agree with everything that Bishop said, and kind of how you introduced the topic, which is we just don't know. There isn't a lot of information that we're getting from the administration about some of these changes in personnel. We know when any new administration comes in, there is change, and that's to be expected. But there's just been a high volume of very senior positions that have been rocking the headlines, and there hasn't been a clear communication of why the performance issues or anything like that. So we're kind of left to speculate at times, which is not good. The American public loves to speculate. And so these news reports linking in particular Kruse's departure to this DIA report, those stories get legs. And I also think is that's a little less high on the radar is that there was also revocations of a number of security clearances the previous week. And those names aren't as well known as perhaps, the head of the DIA, but these are very senior folks in the intelligence community that have been the backbone of national security. You've got, one of the most senior Russian analysts. You've got the chief data scientist at the NSA who was recruited when at 17 to join the NSA, has been there for decades and is incredibly well known and well respected within the community. You've got folks that work on election interference, and for the only reasons that one can speculate is that their previous work, in 2016 on election interference by the Russians, right? That's why folks are seemingly having their security clearances revoked now, and possibly with huge ramifications to our national security. And to Bishop's point, the intentionality of non-politicization of the IC is so that the intelligence that comes out can be held as credible and trusted. And we see now even the ODNI, we see Tulsi Gabbard. The news reports are that we're no longer sharing intelligence about Russia-Ukraine conflict within the Five Eyes, which is a story that we can even talk about. It could be a separate episode here on Fault Lines, right? It's just incredible amount of shakeup within the intelligence community and the defense ecosystem, with not a lot of communication about why we're doing this, and so it leaves us those looking and thinking about national security just kind of perplexed and wondering, a little worried.
Look, I have perhaps a slightly different take. I'm willing to give the administration some grace on this, not a ton, but some. The president is entitled to have the people around him that he thinks will carry out his policies. That's his job. The Secretary of Defense, who actually fired Kruse, is in charge of the uniformed military and needs to have officers reporting to him that he's going to have faith in. And so if he can articulate a reason and a rationale here for the removal of these folks, good on him. If not, then we're kind of left to speculate here. And because it's the Trump administration, people will come up with the worst explanation, because sometimes that's true. And sometimes we have seen some pretty feckless decisions. Sometimes we've actually seen some good decisions. I don't think it's unreasonable to want to look for a shakeup in the defense and the intelligence communities. I think the intelligence community in particular has been over politicized for 10 years. Some might say longer. I think the defense establishment, particularly at senior levels, could always use a shakeup. No one is guaranteed a job here. A lot of these folks are going out at the very top. They're going to be fine. And I think sending a message that we want to make sure people are on their toes is okay. If that's the message, we need to hear the message. But I want to go back to kind of the root cause here of a lot of these stories, which is this supposed delta between obliterating and setting back the Iranian nuclear weapons program several months. Let me tell everyone on the podcast an important fact here. If Iran wants a nuclear weapon, it can buy one from Pakistan or North Korea today. So the idea that you're going to completely stop any chance of them having a nuclear weapon is bananas. That's not a real thing. So when President Trump says we obliterated their program, if he's referring to the fact that we blew up their nuclear mountain, then yes, he's probably correct. But it didn't foreclose the possibility Iran will get a nuclear weapon. Further, this whole idea that Iran is a few months away from having its own nuclear weapon has been true, by my reckoning, for the last 15 years. So that is a meaningless statistic. At the end of the day, it's up to Iran whether or not it has a nuclear weapons. We can do damage to their program, which we did, and make it difficult for them to build their own. But they can go get one on the market if they really need to. And I suspect one of the reasons, by the way, this is totally taking this totally out of left field. The administration has been kind of sidling up to Pakistan recently is because it does have nuclear weapons, and they might be a little bit worried about this scenario. Okay. That's a wrap. Thanks always to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Wednesday, August 27th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube. Check out our channel there for a video of today's episode. We look great. You should check that out. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.